I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I am here with my fantabulous co-host, Rebecca Wood. Yes, and together, Rebecca and I are going to craft an amazing hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family. We have a great show lined up for you today. I have a wonderful guest from Norway, and she's going to be talking about the elections that they had. We're going to be chatting just for the next 10 minutes or so here. And then after we have our little chat, and then we talk to Silja, then ads and patrons, our wonderful advertisers and patrons to whom we are eternally grateful. Then Rebecca will be, one way or another, she'll be on talking about some Bitcoin and CO2. And then it's ecological news. And so, as you may have figured out, we're having technical difficulties because I am calling in. I am actually in Colorado. I drove out here. I flew out here because my son was actually starring in a play out here, a very nice production that I attended yesterday. And I know that going on an airplane flight just to see my son perform in a play is kind of putting tons of CO2 in the air. In fact, I looked it up, and apparently per person on the flights that I took from Detroit to Denver, that added about a ton of CO2 into the atmosphere. Interestingly, that's about the same as driving an average car for about 50 miles. So this is how they get you, though. I really wanted to see this play. I love my son. I hoped he was doing well, and he did really well on the play. It was amazing, and it was an interesting performance because it was a mixture of ASL sign language and English and subtitles, and the play was Barefoot in the Park, and they pulled it off beautifully. They really, everything sort of seamlessly worked together, and you had people communicating with each other, and they were able to do the emotional content, and the people got the humor, and it was really inspiring. But it's just the kind of thing that we're kind of pushed into in this society. There's sort of perverse incentives for us to put more and more carbon in the air, and we're basically going to be here for another day or so, and I'm going to go catch another thing. But one thing I noticed, both driving up into Michigan and once I got here in Denver, was that there was tons and tons of wildfire smoke. And so we haven't updated the Canadian wildfire situation in a while. So let's do that right now. There's 330 wildfires burning in Canada. 130 of them are controlled to some degree or another. 170 are out of control to some degree or another. The number of fires is actually normal. It's about 98% of the 10-year average. But right now, the area that's been covered is increased. It's about 232%, more than double the normal area for wildfires in Canada at this time of year. 8.7 million hectares, which is a whole ton of, it's more than the area of the state of Connecticut. And so, even as we're traveling, you can't escape global warming. You can't go somewhere on the planet that isn't affected, because everywhere is being affected. And even this cool weather that we've been having is the result of global warming, because what's been happening, because the Arctic has been warming so much, the jet stream has drooped way down and made this huge loop that extends all the way from the Gulf of Mexico up into Canada. And so cooler air has been around, but the smoke still circulates and the CO2 is still going in the air. So the whole thing is building up, the globe as a worm. That's why we keep saying global warming, and we never switched over to that whole climate change idea. But another thing, the thing that most people, the biggest carbon supplier for Americans is car driving. And so I have to say, because today's the 14th of September, you have 2 weeks. You have until September 30th to get tax credits for buying an electric vehicle. And it's very important to remember those tax credits include used EVs, which used EVs right now have really great prices. So even if you're someone who can't afford a new EV, you can pick up a used one, and then once you add that tax credit in, you can bring the price down below getting another junker gas car that's going to last you a year or a year and a half. And remember, once you go EV, you have half the maintenance costs, a fraction of the fuel costs, because, gas versus electric, powering your car with electric costs less than a third as much as it does filling it up with gas. And I'm going to make a prediction here, because you may have noticed that gas prices for the last few weeks have been pretty low. But I think this is tied to the tax credit. I think that the gas companies are realizing whenever they have the prices high, people start buying electric vehicles. And so they're keeping the prices really low until the September 30th deadline has passed. And so what I'm thinking is going to happen is October 1st, what's going to happen is the prices are going to go through the roof. Once the EV tax credit is gone, the gas companies will be like, wow, we have you now. And they're just going to skyrocket up into $3, maybe even $4 per gallon range. So this is a prediction I am making. But one place on the planet where the EV question has been settled, where pretty much every new car sold is an EV, and the used cars that are gas are rapidly dropping out of the picture, is Norway. We've reported on Norway quite a bit on this whole, more than 90% of new vehicles sold are EVs. But they just had a very interesting development there, because even though Norway leads the world in some ways, in other ways, they're very dependent upon fossil fuels because Norway is the largest oil and gas exporter in Europe because they have lots of oil fields up there in the North Sea. But they just had elections last week, and those elections basically led to a victory by the Greens, and the implications of that are really important for the whole world. So I managed to get a hold of somebody who lives in Norway, and we had a very nice
Hello
interview.
and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your organization?
Yeah, so my name is Silja Lundberg, and I'm with Oil Change International. So I'm the campaign manager for the North Sea work that we do with Oil Change International.
That's great. Could you tell us a little bit more about Oil Change International? I know you have offices at least in the US and Norway. Um,
No, so Oil Change International is a research, communications, and advocacy organization. And we're working on exposing the true costs of fossil fuels, and also facilitating the ongoing transition away from fossil fuels over to clean energy. So we have people working all over the world. So we have regional teams in the US, of course, Africa, Asia, and then North Sea, in addition to working more on like international diplomacy, working with international finance of oil and gas, and also trying to track the oil and gas industry themselves, working by trying to follow what the different oil and gas companies or oil and gas majors are doing across the globe.
All right, well, you guys have a lot of work to do. That's a pretty big task you've taken on there. That's great. In terms of changing our energy, the global energy policies there, you're based in Norway at Oslo, I'm assuming. Yep.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Norway just had some very big elections that had big implications for Norway's energy future. Could you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we just had the elections in Norway, so the parliamentary election. And currently, or before the election, we are ruled by a minority Labour government. So they don't have the majority in parliament, so they seek support in different issues across parliament and across the different political parties. And contrary to the US, we have quite a lot of different parties in Norway. So in parliament, we have 9 different political parties across the spectrum of like far to the left to far to the right. And we were very excited about how the election was going to go. So we had our general election on September 8th. So it's just, it's very recent. And in that election, Labour won. So Labour got re-elected, which is probably something that's going to, or it's definitely going to be exciting working with Norwegian policies in the next 4 years with the Labour minority government. So it will still be a minority government, and Labour needs to seek support in Parliament. And what was especially exciting about this election was that the Green Party managed to get above the 4% electoral threshold. So if you reach above 4% of the votes in Norway, then you get awarded more seats in Parliament than if you're below it. So if you have a party that's on like 3.9%, they might end up getting 1 or 2 seats in Parliament. But if they are above 4%, then they might get 8 or 9 seats in Parliament. And the Green Party managed finally to get above the 4% threshold. So they now have a group of eight MPs, in addition to the Socialist Left Party and the Green Party as well. Sorry, the Red Party as well. So all of these three parties are parties with a quite radical oil and gas policy, and are all campaigners for getting a new oil and gas policy in Norway, one that actually is in harmony and is in sync with our climate targets and with the Paris Agreement. So it looks like Labour is going to, or because they need the support of these parties to get the budget through each year, hopefully that also makes it possible to get some more restrictive oil and gas policies, because the opposition that Labour faces kind of from their own side of the aisle will be much stronger than what it has been before. So we are hoping that in the next 4 years we'll manage to push the Labour government to passing more more restrictive oil and gas policies, and taking some bold steps towards actually phasing out our oil and gas production.
Mm-hmm. So a couple of those bold steps, for example, I understand one of the positions is no new oil and gas exploration.
Yeah, so that is the first thing that Norway needs to do, is to stop looking for more oil and gas. And if we look across the North Sea at other countries that we share the sea areas with, the UK have gone down that path themselves, also with the Labour government, and have now put forth a proposal, which is on a open hearing, but one that says that the UK will stop licensing new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. So it's not like it can't be done, or that other countries haven't done it, but Norway is quite far from it, and often from the international communities and people in other countries have this image of Norway as a very green and eco-friendly country, but at the same time, we are Europe's biggest producer of oil and gas, and definitely one that is looking, or so far the government has had a position that they are continuing to look for more and to explore for more, and then also to allow new production to start. So the key thing and the first step, of course, is to stop looking for more oil and gas, and that is now what we are hoping that the new government does, and that they actually seize the moment to end new oil and gas exploration, and also to align with the Paris Agreement. So that is like the first step that we hope. But of course, one of the things that Norway also needs to do is to start planning for the phase out of oil and gas. And this, I would say, something that is a bit further down the line, but still essential to actually be able to have a phase out of oil and gas that is in harmony not only with the climate targets, but also with the local communities that are dependent on the oil and gas industry today, so that we make sure that we have a transition away from fossil fuels that is fair and that is funded, so that workers are able to transition to other and better jobs, and that they're not just left empty-handed when the oil and gas eventually will begin a decline. So we're hoping that the new government and the new parliament will be bold in being able to plan for that decline, and to be able to take a democratic steering of it and not just leave it to the markets, which is something that we have a tendency to do in Norway.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Norway's reputation as a leader in environmental issues, and here in the U.S., it's not widely known, but only about 15% of registered voters are actually Republican. And the vast majority of Americans actually do believe global warming is real and we should do something about it, even though that's not reflected in our national policies. But in Norway, the people of Norway, it sounds like, are taking a lot of personal steps, and the results of this election maybe more fairly represent the opinions of basically the people of Norway. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe mention the rise of the EV in Norway?
Yeah, I mean, Norway has, and as a country, we have passed a lot of good environmental policies in the past, and done and tried to do it in a way that makes it easier for people to choose climate-friendly solutions and eco-friendly solutions. If you look at the EV revolution, I would say many says that it actually started in Norway because parties in government and in parliament across the aisle decided that to be able to kind of have um, more EV cars and to be able to actually start to phase out the fossil fuel cars with that run on petrol or diesel, it needed to be more cheaper to buy EV cars, and they made a whole support regime, both in terms of the fact that then when you buy a new petrol or diesel car in Norway, it costs a lot of money. But if you decide to buy a EV car, a lot of the taxes that the government has on diesel and petrol cars doesn't apply to EV, and it is cheaper to have during the year. So the government in Norway have, both when it was Labour led and also when it was led by the Conservative Party, passed policies to make that easier, and now to make it so that in the biggest cities, you'll see a very high tendency of people driving EV cars, but also the fact that if we look at the sales of new cars in Norway, so not the used cars but new cars, the whole market is only, I think it's 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 and new cars that are sold are EV cars, so it's a very high percentage, and all of that is very, very good. But at the same time, one of the things that the Norwegian government is struggling with is to do something with the oil and gas production, and tend to focus on the other stuff instead. So what we are hoping is that we now have a government that can actually connect the dots and to be able to both do something with the use of oil and gas, but also with the production of it. But I guess also one of the things that is true too, like the story of this election, is that the Greens got over the threshold, and Labour will have a increased pressure on them from the left side. But at the same time, we are alarmed to see that we have a very big rise of the popular right party, so the Progress Party in Norway, and it's now risen to become Norway's second largest party. And that's a party that really doesn't prioritize climate or environmental issues. So I think that the fact that they have done such a good election as well makes it even more urgent for the government to ensure just transition policies away from fossil fuels, so that Norway can actually prove that it is possible to have a fair and managed shift away from oil and gas.
Mm-hmm. So was climate actually an issue in the election, or did the parties focus more on economy or daily living issues? Or
Yeah, I think that at the beginning of the election campaign, climate wasn't an issue at all. which, I mean, the big parties like Labour and the Conservative Party and the Progress Party, none of who wanted to talk about climate, but wanted only to focus on security issues, defense. Norway is, of course, one of the countries who shares a border with Russia, so the war in Ukraine is close. But then at the end of the election, I would say the election campaign, the last couple of weeks, then climate rose up on the agenda and was more and more talked about. There was a big demonstration outside of Parliament that gathered thousands of people demanding more ambitious climate policies from the new government and from the new Parliament. So I would say that it should have been a bigger issue, but at the end it managed to get more and more talked about and managed to get more and more attention, as it should have had all the way.
All right. Well, that's just about all we have time for.
And thank you so much for listening to that interview. You know, this is one of the best parts of doing this show, is getting to talk to really inspirational people and encouraging people from all over the world. And this is, if Norway could do it, we could do it, frankly, folks. Literally, it's just a political question of, do we have the will to save the environment? And speaking of the environment and ecology, it's time to hear from our patrons and sponsors. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place is right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programming, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures, waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And of course, our show is also brought to you by our wonderful patrons. And these are people who've gone to patreon.com. That's patreon.com. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they looked at the different membership levels, chose a membership level that matched their budget, and signed up. And so now every month, just a little bit comes out of their account, comes over to us, and that's how we can keep this show going. So thank you so much to our patrons. Really, we could not have been doing this without you for all these years and all these wonderful shows. Okay, now it's time to hear from Rebecca, and she's going to be continuing her talk from last week about Bitcoin and so forth. So go ahead, take it away, Rebecca.
This week I wanted to, unfortunately I can't do what I want to because I can't talk in my phone and also read Jasper's statement to the Toledo Museum of the Art at the same time. But I wanted to continue with my series on AI in art, which I'm calling One Teaches What One Needs to Learn, Part 2. So I'm just going to go over a few definitions and add a couple of new ones here. This is all inspired by the Toledo Museum of Art's exhibit on generative art, including several NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens, which are little tiny pictures of things that you can only see on a computer, which belongs to the blockchain that they are on, and they are produced by Bitcoin mining, which is very, very environmentally destructive. But okay, the two ways you can generate those we were talking about last week is a POS system or a POW system, which, although it might be tempting to take the negative connotations of what POS and POW mean in ordinary language, actually means something completely different. Proof of POS is proof of sale, and a POS system is worse, apparently, environmentally, because it's a system where computers compete, multiple computers to compete, to see who can generate the large random prime number which you need to add a computer to the blockchain. So it's multiple computers doing the same thing, using up crazy amounts of energy, whereas in a POW system, proof of work, I believe, the one computer does the whole thing. So the POS to POW transition is like a 99% reduction of energy and emissions generation. A POS produced NFT uses as much energy as a normal household does in 4 days, and generates as much CO2 as a car driving 200 miles per hour. And there are several POS works in the museum. There are multiple POS works which were produced by this very environmentally destructive way of doing things, and you would produce, like, oh my gosh, they were saying tens of thousands of these things, and one of them would be good, that you would keep. So whatever damage a one POS do times 10,000. So yeah, I learned a few things from the CryptoPunk app. There's an app called CryptoPunk.app. And I wanted to find out what CryptoPunks are, because they are also mentioned in Jasper's statement. CryptoPunks are 24 by 24 pixel art images generated algorithmically. So I looked at a couple of these. They are sort of crude, pixelated, cartoonish heads of people with vaguely punk haircuts. I'm not saying they're horrible, but they look like little stickers is what they look like. Stickers which are a couple of bucks per sticker book. I like stickers. Stickers are fun. Actually, I'm sitting right beside a chair which myself and my roommate made by various political and/or travel stickers, which we have acquired in the course of our adventures. And I'm not allowed to touch it because my roommate just varnished it last night, because it's a precious treasure to us. So whatever. It's not like I don't like stickers. They're sort of cute, these little CryptoPunk thingy hoodles, but Jasper keeps using the phrase not transformative to refer to them, and I think I'd have to agree that they don't provoke thoughts or feelings in great quantity. They're just sort of it's like if you had a little sticker with a cute little smiley face or a cute little animal or something, that's about what I would say that I personally, and most people I think, are going to get out of these things, which they are spending insane amounts of money on. Any artist and most non-artists could probably do as well or better than these little CryptoPunk things. Apparently, they're inspired by something called the crypto arts movement. And I looked that up, and basically it's just crypto arts are influenced by conceptual art and pop art. So that's interesting. So it's sort of a extension of the idea of, just doing crazy stuff to make people think, which is conceptual art, which is what I've seen some conceptual art, and that's kind of what it tends to be, and pop art would be like that Andy, what's his name, fella, the one who drew the soup cans. Yeah, I'm blanking.
Warhol.
Out. But yeah, I mean, I actually like this guy's work of the soup cans and, sort of the crazy colored Marilyn Monroes and all that. Like I think of that as art, but I'm not even seeing these coming up to that level. But they've been auctioned by Christie's, the little CryptoPunks, and Sotheby's, and are in some major art museums' permanent collections. I'm not seeing it. I personally do not get it. Now, like, okay, you could argue that they have historical value because this art form is continuing to develop. It's ongoing. Okay, that's nice, but it has not developed into anything all that great yet. I mean, if it does, then they might be of interest, in the same way some sort of crude carving might be, there's a precursor to something else, part of a developing style might be interesting, So there's that. And, yeah, but the thing is, if it does continue to develop, then that's going to be even more environmental stuff just completely laid to waste. I mean, this stuff even with a POW, uses energy that does not to be used up. And as Jasper keeps pointing out, like, they've seen better works of art done with much lower environmentally damaging systems that people also use as sort of an algorithmic generation thing. So why the NFTs? Why are they in there? They might have eventual historic value. Right now, they mostly don't, and we kind of don't want them to, because if they do, it's because people are, producing great art, except for you destroyed the entire planet on, a miniature, basically. So that's not good. So yeah, that is kind of what I have to say for now, for about art and AI, and we'll be getting back to Jasper's statement and trying to read the whole thing all the way through now that we know what the definitions mean next week. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And on with the show. So, yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if maybe the purpose of all this isn't just to generate more CO2, because we're doing things that are really kind of silly and making tons of CO2 in the process. Okay. On to ecological news. And our first story, we're going off to South Vancouver Island up there in Canada. Story in the Narwhal on September 12th, 2025. 4 years after Fairy Creek, a new battle over BC's old growth looms in the Walbran Valley. Walbran is a little place in British Columbia on Vancouver Island, where they are planning to cut down a whole bunch more old growth. And a bunch of protesters have created a blockade. And I got to say, it's one of the most beautiful blockades I've ever seen, because they've taken wood from the left over from the logging, the loggers have left laying around, and turned them into these huge, beautiful sculptures. Like they have a cougar, like a 20-foot tall cougar that's just gorgeous. And that is the name of their camp, Cougar Camp. What they did back in August was they put up a gate and they blocked the logging road so that the loggers couldn't get at their tools to destroy the old growth. So predictably, the logging company took them to court, and a judge, BC Justice, has just granted an injunction saying they've got to take the blockade down. This opens the door for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police thugs to go in there and bust everybody up and destroy everything and do what they've been doing the way they did with Fairy Creek, where 4 years ago they arrested 1,100 people with really terrible brutality. And Canada did a whole bunch of commissions and things afterwards to study what had happened, and all the commissions and all the studies afterwards said that they used way too much force, that the whole thing was actually illegal under Canadian law, which is why one of the things that the people bringing this suit did was ask the judge in her injunction to say that the police could use any action that is reasonably necessary to break the camp up. She didn't grant that. I guess she did that so she could sleep at night. But she did say that the balance of convenience means that the protesters, even though they are right in that this last little bit of old growth in Vancouver on the island is worth a lot more than the momentary profit that these companies are going to make by destroying it. It came out in the trial that this is 11 jobs, that all this destruction of this whole section of old growth only means 11 jobs, but it does mean tens of millions in profit. So the people that are in this encampment understand, they don't have any illusions that they're going to be able to hold out physically against the British police, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who have, military-grade equipment. But they're doing it anyway. They're saying we have to do this because these trees are more valuable than the money that is being generated here. They're being led by the elder Bill Jones. He's a Packaghat elder. And interestingly, 5 years ago, the ruling party in British Columbia promised to stop old growth logging. They did this big study that included logging companies, and everybody agreed, yeah, we need to stop doing this. But then they never actually put the laws in place to support it. And so the logging companies over the past 5 years have just been going ahead and destroying all the old growth. And it'll be gone soon. It's just a few years left at the rate of cutting it. But kudos and prayers and, as much spiritual support as I can send to those brave protesters up there in British Columbia. Next story. Yale program on climate change, and this was on September 9th. Title is, about half of Americans understand that global warming is increasing homeowners' insurance costs. And we always talk on our show at the beginning about how we're talking about things that affect your wealth, your health, and your happiness. So this is a direct wealth thing because homeowner insurance is going through the roof. It's increasing everywhere. According to the study, 82% of Americans believe home insurance is going up. 70% agree or believe that these are from disasters, that the cause of all these wildfires, floods, heat waves, all these things that damage homes. That's why the premiums are going up. Oh, plus people believe profit taking and inflation and property values going up are also part of why homeowners insurance is going up. But only about 50% connect the global warming disasters to global warming. Only about 50% say that the reason we're having more floods and fires and heat waves is because of global warming. And it's interesting, it breaks down pretty much along political lines. Democrats and people who lean Democrats, 70% of them make this connection that say, yeah, obviously, if the rate of destruction being caused by global warming increases, our insurance will increase. Republicans just disconnect. They just disconnect the cause of the increases of these disasters from the disasters. They're like, they do accept, oh yeah, there's way more fires and floods and so forth, but what's happening, they don't know. They can't accept the scientific evidence that it's because of global warming. So that's basically what's going on with that story. Let's bring it on back to Ohio. Ohio Capital Journal, September 11th. This is a more upbeat story here. Ohio regulators turned down appeal and OK Utilities data center billing plan. What's happened is American Electric Power has said that data centers need to be billed at a higher rate than everybody else. And the reason is because they are using just amazing amounts of power. Just as an illustration, in the proceedings, they pointed out that the Central Ohio sector of power has a peak demand of 4,000 megawatts. That is 4 nuclear powers worth of power during peak demand. The increase in data centers that is already in the pipeline, already signed, data centers built or being built, that's going to increase demand by 4,000 megawatts by 2030. So in just 5 years, it's going to, just the data centers are going to double the peak demand, and they're going to be running all the time, 24/7. And there's another 30,000 megawatts, another 30 nuclear plants worth of data centers in the pipeline, either being considered or contracts are being negotiated. And those will all be online by 2030. And so AEP says, look, they're using so much more power, we have to charge them at least a little bit extra. But of course, the data centers and the Ohio Manufacturers Association opposed this. They went to court, or they went to the Public Utilities Commission to try to get cheaper power for the utilities. Actually, cheaper than what the data centers were cheaper than what PUCO was going to allow the AEP to charge the data centers. And luckily, for this one time, Public Utilities Commission agreed with the people and are charging a slightly higher rate for data centers. The Ohio Consumers Council has applauded the decision. The Ohio Manufacturers Association said they're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court, the Ohio Supreme Court, which is completely filled with Republicans, and so who knows what's going to happen there. All right. And of course, what the answer is all these data centers should be required by law to cover their entire footprint with solar, all right, their entire roof, one end to the other, their parking lot. If we covered every area that the data centers cover with solar, then that's going to do a whole bunch to cut that peak demand. It's going to help everybody. There is some data center opposition mounting around the state. There's a second huge data center proposed for Wood County, and there's some citizens that are starting to get together to oppose that, but we'll see where that goes. Next story, we're going off to Queensland in Australia. And we talk a lot about South Australia, which is way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of switching over to renewables. The whole province is down to a single tiny little 40 megawatt gas plant, and all the rest is wind and solar and storage, battery storage. But Queensland is run by a conservative government, and they have vowed, the title of this story on March 14th is Queensland LNP, that's Liberal National Party, vows to burn coal for many decades as federal labor wrestles with climate pledge. And so the province party, the Labor Party overall, has promised to cut greenhouse gas emissions in Australia, but the Queensland Labor Party has other ideas. And so what they're doing is they're going to come out with a new energy plan in October. And a lot of people are afraid that this is going to be a Trump-based energy plan. That party has already blocked 2 wind farms for no apparent reason, just said, no, we don't want wind, the same way Trump has off the coast of the U.S. And the ironic thing is that the largest energy user in Queensland is the Rio Tinto metal forging plant that uses 13% of the entire province's power, and they want renewables. They want wind and solar and battery because they see that it's more stable than these coal plants, which are breaking down left and right, and they're only 45 to 65% online. They crash so often, they're ancient, and they take tons of maintenance. And so even the big businesses in this Australian province want wind and solar. But this one political party, backwards-facing political party, looks like they might try to derail the whole thing in Queensland. So let's hope that's not what ends up happening. Okay, so let's bring it back to Ohio. And there's the university hospitals, which are based in Cleveland. They did an interesting article on September 2nd, and this is more of an ecological story again. The title is Alpha-Gal Syndrome, the Meat Allergy Caused by a Tick Bite. And it turns out, you may have heard about this, that there's a tick that if it bites you, you become allergic to not just red meat, but you can also become allergic to dairy products as well. And so it literally forces people to become vegans, because what happens if they eat meat or dairy is they get this terrible allergic reaction. And this has increased there were 24 cases in 2009 nationwide. Right now, there's 450,000 cases, and they're all across the continent, from the southeast part, Florida, all the way up to like around Montana or so. You can just draw a big like square, and that's the range of this Lone Star tick, which is the one that carries this disease. Ecologically, it's a very interesting disease because this is not like a virus or something. What happens is that the ticks eat blood from a deer mostly, and that blood has in it a couple compounds, galactose alpha 1 or 3 galactose. Together, they're called the alpha-gal proteins. And by sucking them out of the deer on the early part of their life cycle, they put it back into the humans when they go bite people in the later part of their life cycle. And that's what creates, the body creates antibodies against those, and that's what creates the allergy. And a weird thing about this allergy is that it's a delayed reaction. So if you have it, you eat meat, and then 6 to 8 hours, you can break out with the symptoms. That's hives, face swelling, itching, shortness of breath, etc. And so it's rather tricky because people, the first time they get it, they might have like a steak for dinner, and then they wake up in the middle of the night having this terrible allergic reaction. And as we said, we're up to 450,000 people with this being carried by the Lone Star tick. Now, one thing they say is that this may reduce over the years, may not. But so watch out for tick bites, or go vegan, and this isn't a problem for you. Last story: Gulf of Mexico is at record temperatures. The meteorologist Noah Bergen pointed that out in a Facebook post on September 10th. There have been no hurricanes to speak of, which means that the temperature keeps increasing because hurricanes pull heat away from the Gulf. Because of the weird jet stream, it keeps shearing off the storms that try to form hurricanes. And so the heat is building up, and it has just broken all records. Even though, this is kind of like an explosion. To have an explosion, you need containment. You have to let the forces build up, and then they break out of the containment. So the heat is being contained in the Gulf right now. So when storms do happen, they're going to accelerate at record rates. They're going to become extremely, extremely powerful, extremely, extremely fast. And in fact, the last Hurricane Erin that managed to break out of the North Atlantic or out of the Atlantic Ocean broke all records for rapid intensification. And you might think we're late in the hurricane season, which is true, but 60% of all hurricanes happen in the second half of the season. And so meteorologists are extremely worried. Right now, the sea surface temperature in the Gulf of Mexico is 87 degrees. So just sort of imagine that. If you get into 87-degree water when you go into the ocean, that's kind of like, that's a hot bath, basically. And it's also important to note that high temperatures are very high stress on marine animals, on fish, on mollusks, on the critters that live in the ocean. And so it reduces the fertility of the ocean, and that reduces the rate that the ocean pulls carbon dioxide out of the ocean. And so that is another part of the ongoing positive feedback loop where the effects of global warming cause more global warming. So this is not a good situation. Meteorologists are very worried that this loop in the jet stream will straighten itself out. And once that happens, hurricanes are just going to pop up like mushrooms, and they're going to be super powerful hurricanes because the amount of energy in this Gulf water is just unprecedented. Okay, well, I think that's about it. I think we're here I'm looking at the clock. This is Joe DeMare. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week live in studio without these technical problems. Thanks, and have a good week.
I don't want no oil, a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!